a copy of the presentation as a reference. So can everyone hear me? Just want to make sure. That you can hear me. Okay, good. So I understand that some people, that everyone can hear me. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with the presentation. The question that you're probably asking is whether these SBA changes that were made in November and effective January 1 simplifies your franchise lending business or whether it complicates it. And the answer is yes, it does both. Today I'm going to cover how the Franchise Registry changes in the SOP simplified some things and where it shifted risk. I'll also show you how the Franchise Registry made the process as simple as the SBA intended it to be, and how the Franchise Registry will mitigate the risks that have been shifted onto you, and therefore allow your 2017 franchise lending to be a seamless process with reduced risk. So over the next hour, what we're going to address is franchisor reaction to SBA changes, lender reaction to SBA changes, and the Franchise Registry solution. Before we get started, I want to get feedback from you on how you have digested these SBA changes and how you feel how they're going to affect your lending. Are you feeling positive, negative, or are you not certain? So if you could just bear with me because we have a lot of folks on the webinar, so it'll take some time to tally up their responses. I really appreciate all of you who are participating and voting. It allows us to get a great representation. Okay. So I think it's safe to see that there's overwhelming uncertainty that are showing from these results. The vast majority of lenders are feeling uncertain. So not a lot are negative. There's definitely a nice percentage of those who are feeling good about it, but vast majority are feeling uncertain. I will say that we've had over 1,000 lenders participate in our webinars since the SBA changes, and overwhelmingly you are not alone. Most feel uncertain about these changes. I think it's helpful to have context, historical context, before we get into the actual changes. So for those of you that remember the SBA franchise reviews prior to the financial crisis, SBA really only looked at a handful of issues that were focused on what SBA calls franchise affiliation. There are a lot of issues in the franchise agreement that SBA determined prevented a franchisee the right to profit or sustain a loss commensurate with their own efforts. But at the time, most addendums really focused on the transfer issue almost exclusively. Then came the financial crisis when SBA experienced unprecedented losses in their portfolio, and SBA reviewed all of the defaulted loans. And they noticed a significant number of issues that lenders missed in their loan evaluation. Additionally, this is the first time that SBA saw that franchise affiliation issues by their interpretation could affect a franchisee's right to profit. Therefore, it was at this time that SBA started expanding their rules. So more rules came into the franchise affiliation review, and SBA started reviewing other documents for other SBA requirements. And they were also consistently making determinations on business eligibility. The most famous of these was Solis Salons and Salons by JC, which were taken off the Franchise Registry in August of 2009 because SBA determined that these businesses were passive and therefore not eligible for SBA financing. The SBA then determined in October 2010 that they were eligible businesses, and then again determined that they were ineligible in 2014. So they kind of have a torn past with this particular set of brands and the Salon Suites business. In 2010, master franchise agreements were also determined to be ineligible for SBA financing. This was a business eligibility issue, not a franchise affiliation issue. And in 2011 is when SBA expanded all of their reviews to other franchise documents. In many ways, the new SOP is going back to pre-recession days. So it's helpful to illustrate what the differences are between the SBA's SOP when you have a side-by-side comparison. As you know, the SBA has put out an SOP nearly every single year for the past 7 years. So let's take a look at the differences between the past two SOPs. So in 2016, SBA provided you lenders with determinations on everything related to hurdles that a franchise uniquely brought to the financing equation. They provided determinations on whether a brand's business was a franchise according to SBA's broad, unique definition. SBA determined business eligibility. And as we mentioned about Salon Suites, lenders and SBA can debate about them, but at the end of the day, SBA stood by their listing on the Franchise Registry, and no lender suffered a loss because they did vet the business eligibility, and subsequent leadership changed their position on that decision. SBA customized franchise affiliation addendums by franchise systems, and a certification was provided for each franchise. And negotiated streamlined solutions for other documents were provided to meet SBA's requirements. Now in 2017, SBA has provided a one-size-fits-all franchise affiliation addendum, which means that you don't have to wait for SBA to provide their determination. It's a sign it or don't get financing ultimatum for franchisors versus a negotiation with franchisors relative to the language that they need to meet their franchise system requirements. So you have a streamlined solution for franchise affiliation, but there have been 3 risks that have been shifted back to you in this process. The first is that SBA has changed their definition of a franchise. So you must determine whether a brand's business meets the FTC guidelines. The second is that you must determine business eligibility. And this is an area where franchises were held up for the longest period of time when SBA reviewed franchise registry applications to the Office of Litigation, whereby the franchise business operations manuals were often reviewed. In one case, a franchise system had to completely change their curriculum to meet the business eligibility guidelines. And the third risk is that you must identify the issues and negotiate solutions on a one-off basis with franchisors on their other documents. This is an area that I think is really worth commenting on. The average franchise agreement is 40 pages. So what the SBA has done is they've taken away, you don't have to review that 40-page document on average for franchise affiliations. But what they're still saying is that the average FDD, which is can range between 300 and 800 pages, is something that needs to be reviewed for you based on the other SBA requirements. So I remember back in the day when we used to get franchise disclosure documents, formerly UFOCs, in paper form, and we would put them on a scale to weigh to figure out how many pages they were before the days of PDF. So this year alone, we database close to 5,000 franchise disclosure documents. So, so we know how large FDDs can be. So I'm sure most of you are wondering, how are franchisors, how are they reacting to these changes? And I will tell you, we have an effort right now where we are calling up 1,500 franchisors to get their responses. And as you can imagine, it's a very slow process because franchisors are just kind of tuning into this issue. And but we've been educating and requesting feedback. And so far, the response is mixed. And we'll go through in more detail what the mixed response has been. So the positive is that 60% of franchisors so far that have been contacted are positive that they will sign the addendum, the affiliation addendum. But 40% have come back with issues. So those issues we are categorizing and referring to the ISA for future conversation with the SBA. So what is the initial franchise community reaction? So they fall into really three categories: concerns, positive feedback, and unresolved questions. So the first is, I'll go with the positive side. The positive feedback is that there is a reduction in the number of rules. So there used to be like 20 rules, and now it's been reduced to 9. For franchisors who are fine with the addendum, they're happy that they don't need to wait for SBA to review their franchise agreement for franchise affiliation issues. Some of the unresolved questions include, do the other FTC exemptions apply? So in the definition of a franchise, SBA explicitly says that you have to use the FTC definition. And in the FTC definition, gas stations are exempt. But SBA has not exempted them from their definition of a franchise. There are a total of 7 exemptions in the FTC rule. So the other exemptions haven't been covered. Now, based on the addendum, it appears as though some previously ineligible brands, the classic ineligible brand for years has been 7-Eleven. If they're willing to sign the addendum, it appears that they would be eligible. And the question is, was that the SBA's intent? And finally, the number one question asked of us on the webinars that we've conducted with franchisors is, will this rule be substantially modified or eliminated? So since we've been reaching out to franchisors, we've gotten a lot of feedback. I think the most telling and I think chilling response has been from one major brand, Dunkin' Donuts. Dunkin' Donuts sent an email out to all of their franchisees saying that they will not sign the addendum, and therefore all SBA lending to the Dunkin' Donuts system has ceased. Millions of SBA dollars that were in process have been put on hold or canceled. So their concern is that there are far too many deals out there in SBA world that has this affiliation addendum that could be in place for 10 to 15 years. and they have enough concerns about this addendum to say that it is not worth it for them to sign the addendum. From our understanding from some franchisors who have expressed this kind of definitive answer to whether they will sign it or not in the negative, they have been contacted by SBA, and apparently SBA is trying to sell them on this addendum. But for the larger systems, which is what we assumed would happen when we learned about this particular change, are ones that are having the most cause for concern. So I thought it would be useful for you just to kind of understand some of the concerns that have been brought up. And what SBA's intent is to make it a simple process. But I think the outcome is that it's so simple, it doesn't allow the flexibility that franchise systems need to really set the parameters and guidelines. Legal agreements need to be specific, and a lot of the language generally is quite vague. And we're talking about franchise systems that, if you think about Tide Dry Cleaning, for example, the $3 billion brand, and some of these systems are not willing to put that kind of brand reputation issue for vagueness that is in the current addendum. So let's give you some examples. So most of the franchise addendums before gave the franchisor the ability to qualify the terms in the addendum. So around change of ownership, they could qualify what the conditions were that the franchisee would have to meet that are inherent in almost every single franchise system, but most of them customized it to their specific criteria. The for sale of assets is, again, clarity is a problem because it's been simplified to what they are referring to as kind of the lowest common denominator. And recording covenants, we've had franchisors talk about what they need and routinely seek. So they're fine with not recording covenants, but they need to be able to take action if the franchisee fails to adequately de-identify. There are some franchisors who are completely incensed that there's a presumptive link of joint employment in the addendum. So some franchisors have expressed that the contract explicitly says that the franchisee is an independent contractor. And while that's always been a rule, it's never been observed in a franchise addendum because it's never been an issue, or at least it has never been one that has been approved for SBA financing. And then there are other franchisors who spent lots and lots of money customizing their agreements to address the other issues. And now those issues are being left to be put back into your hands. And they felt like they spent lots of time and money to work with SBA to hammer out these issues. Now they're going to have to deal with each individual lender, driving up the cost and time to do business. So when we've had franchisors on the webinar, we've asked them, how do you feel about SBA's SOP franchise changes? And very similar to the way that you feel, the vast majority felt uncertain. At the same time, there have been a lot of folks that haven't had a chance to review the new SOP standards. So they were coming to the webinar for the first time learning about these changes. We also asked for those who have reviewed the addendum, what's your reaction? And I was particularly surprised by this response. 44% didn't know. So they were still, I guess it makes sense, they were still consulting with their attorneys, and so they didn't have a definitive answer. 26% had concerns, and 30% have no concern based on that webinar. And then the final question is, do you know if other SBA requirements could affect your franchise system? And 83% had no idea. So how do you anticipate that these changes will affect your internal or external costs to finance franchises? Do you think it's going to increase, decrease, stay the same, or you don't know? And we've got a lot more folks on the webinar since we did our first poll, so bear with me as we wait for the poll responses to come in. Okay. All right, it looks like we've got some even responses or close tie between increase and don't know. A small group thinks their costs will decrease, and there's a nice chunk of folks who thinks it's going to stay the same. Okay, so still a lot of certainty, but some for enough think that it's going to increase or stay the same. There are very few who actually think it's going to decrease. Well, thank you for participating in that poll. I've got one more for you. How do you think these changes will affect the number of franchise loans that you will be able to finance in 2017? I love real-time responses to questions. This is great. Thank you so much for participating. Okay, uncertain. Yeah, I guess most of you aren't sure, still kind of waiting to figure out how to adjust to these changes and depend on how franchisors are responding to these changes as well. So most of you are uncertain, and some feel that it will negatively, and there's a percentage of you that are thinking it will positively impact. Okay, so I think it's helpful for you to see we've held 2 other webinars, as I said, totaling about 1,000 lenders, and your very similar responses. A lot of uncertainty on the SOP changes and how uncertainty, most lenders are feeling uncertain about how it will affect the number of loans that they will be able to finance. The number one question that we receive after how will this SBA SOP change affect my franchise lending is, will the Franchise Registry operated by FRANdata be going away? And the answer is, of course not. You have uncertainty and risk, and the Franchise Registry has always solved your uncertainty and risk, and it's going to continue to do so. I'm sure it's really confusing for you the way the SOP is written, and it sounds like the Franchise Registry is going away. There have been a few lenders and brokers that have been particularly active in advertising how wonderful these new changes are, and the fact that it's so easy and that the Franchise Registry is going away. So the Franchise Registry has never been paid for by the SBA. It has always been a site which on the SBA documentation side has been paid for by franchisors. And it's a way for franchisors to streamline the process for you lenders, and they have been willing to do so to make it easy and to meet SBA's requirements. So SBA is not requiring you to go to the Franchise Registry to get information, but franchisors are using it to make sure that they have a streamlined solution and they can decrease their costs and time associated with individual loans. So if there's one thing that you take away with from today, it's that everything, and I mean everything you have had access to before, you will continue to have access to and more. We've had people who have gone to the Franchise Registry and tried to download as much as possible off of the site, and we've had to contact lenders and let them know that this is not something that's necessary. It's all going to be there tomorrow. We've left up all of the historical SBA approvals, the franchise documents, so everything on the Franchise Registry will be there. So let's go ahead and talk about how the Franchise Registry is peeling apart these changes. I'm going to help you through these changes. So this view should look very familiar to you. It's the account page of a franchisor. So Zaxby's is our example. And it provides you general information about the franchisor, their business description, their NAICS code. That's worth noting because we've seen franchise brands in the SBA portfolio that are associated with 10 and 15 NAICS codes. Franchisors are not associated with 10 or 15 NAICS codes. They're associated with one, maybe two. FRUNS numbers, which is a unique brand number, which I'll get into more detail in a moment, and the contact information that is provided by the franchisor, which tells you who you should contact and for each specific purpose. So the franchisor tells us the person who is responsible for signing the SBA documentation. I know that many lenders send that SBA documentation to the borrower first and then send it to the borrower then sends it to their person, their field ops person, their salesperson, who then it eventually gets to the right person or may not, may go through another person. That is not the right way to make this process easy for you. The borrower can't sign that document without the franchisor signing it first. So you want to send it directly to the franchisor so the franchisor can give you feedback about whether they are willing and able to sign it for that particular borrower. So send it to the person who they have put down as their agent authorized to sign these documents. The second is the franchise salesperson. This is the person who the franchisor says, if you want to set up a referral relationship with us, you contact the franchise salesperson. If you have credit questions that are associated with the brand, then you contact the franchise financing person. Now, of course, you want to be vigilant about not sending the CFO of Zaxby's every single question that comes to mind. So you want to make sure that they're impactful questions and that they're absolutely necessary. So let's go ahead and dig into the SBA folder to view how the Franchise Registry will simplify your life. So the first risk that has been shifted back onto you is you have to determine who meets the definition of the FTC definition. So is the business a franchise according to the FTC definition? So this information will say yes, no, and then give you the reasons why for brands whose accounts that have been updated. So if you want to see an example of a brand that has been updated after you get off this call, by all means, log into a tropical smoothie as an example. That's a brand whose account information has been updated. So for brands like Red Wing Shoes, that is a dealer model, and they do not meet one of the tests that would mean that they meet the definition of a franchise. The Franchise Registry will tell you which part they don't meet and so why they are not a franchise. If they are not a franchise, then the affiliation section underneath that will say not applicable. If they are a franchise, then the next section will tell you whether or not the franchisor will sign the addendum. And if the account has not been updated, it will say unverified. The great news for the FTC definition is that FRANdata's database has always categorized branded businesses as FTC businesses or not. SBA has always had a unique definition. So we've already received responses from over 150 franchisors who have agreed to sign the addendum. All of their accounts are up to date in terms of the fact that they will sign. The additional information that we are getting from franchisors in the notes box is what information do they need from you in order to sign this affiliation addendum? When in the process will they sign it? And are there any conditions? So for example, a franchisor might not sign the addendum until the franchise agreement, if it was signed in the individual capacity, has been assigned to a corporation. Any of these details that you need to know ahead of time, we'll put into the notes box. There's a natural tension in this SBA lending process because the franchisor doesn't want to sign the affiliation addendum until after the franchise agreement has been signed. But oftentimes, especially if it's a very large investment, the franchisor doesn't want to sign the agreement until the financing is secured. There's a little chicken or egg problem. So we do have franchisors who we've talked to who are willing to sign or have a document that says they have the intent to sign to give you comfort that if the franchisees get financing, they have full intentions of signing that document for that transaction. There are other hotel lenders that put these documents into escrow that are only released once the financing has occurred. So the particulars of when they will sign and what needs to be provided will be in this section of the Franchise Registry. Business eligibility is the next risk that has been passed over to you. So SBA has made decisions on business eligibility, as I mentioned, and this is a considerable risk because loans without affidavits for curves for women, those loans were denied. So if additional documentation is required to meet business eligibility guidelines, then those documents will be added for your ease of access. So it will say yes, no, and then if yes, but there is additional documentation required, it will be on the registry. Finally, there are risks relative to other SBA requirements. So there are brands that have had comfort letters. In the case, I think, of Five Guys, they had a subordination agreement that prior to getting on the franchise registry was not SBA eligible. And there are brands that have those agreements in place and aren't SBA eligible because they don't meet SBA's requirements. Also, the affiliation addendum does not address Subway's lease agreement, which they won't modify for SBA financing for the purchase of real estate unless the franchisee has 5 or more locations. So these other documents that have been modified to meet requirements, they'll be posted and it will explain that how they meet SBA requirements. And otherwise, the documents will be posted and explain that they do not meet SBA requirements. And all of these documents will refer back to previous decisions made by SBA because we know that you need assurances of the information, and we stand behind all of this information by providing you access to the historical reviews and access reference points to those historical reviews. So if you are curious about brands that you work with, what I would encourage you to do is to add brands to your portfolio that you regularly finance, have targeted to finance for 2017, or have in your pipeline. So after this webinar, you can go into each brand's account and individually add brands to your portfolio on this site. So we've had lenders reach out to us specifically about a brand, and that is, we encourage you to do that as well. But if you want up-to-the-minute information, the site will provide you feedback based on brands that are in your portfolio. So it's very easy to do. You search for the brand, and on every page of the brand's account in the upper right-hand corner, there's a blue button to add the brand to your portfolio. Once you click on that button, add to the portfolio, it will bring you to the portfolio page, which looks like this. Now, I'm actually logged in as a paying lender subscriber, so the one thing that's showing to you is the fund score, and what you would see is that there is a report or there isn't a report without being able to see the score. But any change to the information displaying on this page will trigger an email to you. So what does this mean? Any information, whether it's the brand name, the Inc. name, changes in total franchise units, the fact that there is a new fund report, adding a new bank credit report, a new franchise disclosure document, and finally and most importantly for this call, changes in SBA documentation. So this will include updates to any piece of information on the SBA documentation tab, including whether the franchisor will sign the affiliation addendum, if the business meets the definition of a franchise according to the FTC, business eligibility, and documents to resolve other SBA requirements. Now, these emails will be starting next week. So you have an opportunity to add brands to your portfolio. We will be sending you out an email alerting you to the fact that you will be getting notifications, and you can go into the site and adjust the notifications to your needs. So we don't want to overwhelm you. So you can customize these notifications based on the brands within your portfolio on the site and then for the site overall. So for instance, on the right-hand side for all franchises, if you want to indicate that any new franchise that's added to the site that has SBA documentation added, then you would select that and then just indicate the frequency with which you want to get those notifications. Weekly, monthly, etc. So, and what I would say is that, just as most of you regularly have in the past, you want to continue to send franchise brands to us that aren't on the Franchise Registry or don't have their SBA tab up to date. This is really a community of interest site for you, and you will get what you want out of it. So for all of the SBA documentation section, this is free to you, and it saves you time and money and helps you reduce your risk. So many of you made it a requirement for a brand to do business with you, and it's in your best interest to do so. You have another check of the franchise experts who have been in the business of reviewing franchise documents to meet SBA reviews for over 20 years. So now there are notifications that are for paying subscribers, and there are notifications for any lender that has free membership, which all of you have the ability to have or already do. So we'll send you an email, as I mentioned, as soon as that functionality, because we don't want to overwhelm you, so you can customize your notifications. But in the meantime, go ahead and add those brands to your portfolio. And if you're on the webinar and you're not a member of the Franchise Registry, it's very easy. This is only a lender site, so you can go to the home page of the Franchise Registry and click on New Lenders. And Paul Santamaro is our lender support specialist, and everyone on the call who has interacted with him know that he's very fast and extremely helpful. So, so please don't hesitate. Okay, so let's just review the process really quickly that we just reviewed, because I know it's a lot of new information for most of you. So what you'll do when you have a franchise loan is you log into the Franchise Registry. The first thing that you're going to find out is confirm that the brand is associated with a franchise under the FTC rule on the Franchise Registry. Then you'll determine whether or not the franchisor is willing to sign. If yes, determine when in the loan process, which it will show you on the Franchise Registry. If not, the Franchise Registry will have notes on what stipulations or requirements the franchisor has if they're doing it on an exception basis. And then the next step is you determine whether the franchise brand has any business eligibility issues. Then determine whether the franchise brand has any other SBA requirements, which would also be outlined. And if further verification of business eligibility or other SBA requirement issues are desired, you will have reference points to those historical reviews. And all of this information, we're adding a print button to all parts of the Franchise Registry so you can easily print them to a PDF or to paper. And then the next step, naturally after you get past the SBA process, is evaluating whether the brand has any credit risk issues to help you underwrite the system and document the loan folder for internal risk management and regulatory purposes. And for those lenders who are subscribers to our fund report database, you can compare a specific brand's fund score and all of their success metrics against peer brands and the sector to know whether this is the brand where you want to move aggressively with or need to make sure that the borrower is compensating for any credit risk issues that the system brings to the equation. Okay. One other question that we've been asked is about the FRUNS numbering system. So SBA appears to be creating their own numbering system. It's not entirely clear yet, and there has been references to this change. I've been asked recently by a number of lenders whether they'll still have access to the FRUNS numbering system. So many of you have been using the FRUNS system to track financing inquiries by franchise and to monitor the portfolio of your brands. There are some of you who subscribe to have the new brands and changes to brand names and ink names tracked on a monthly basis, while others just use the free information. So no worries. The FRUNS number will still be available by brand on the Franchise Registry. The FRUNS is the backbone of FRANdata's databases, and it's really the only way you can accurately organize and understand franchise brands. To help you understand why, there are over 250 new franchise brands created every year. We add a new brand to our database at the rate of 1 to 2 new brands a day. And over the past few years, there have been over 6,000 cases of franchisors changing either their ink name or brand name. So some of them are changes to their ink name. An example just to kind of help you understand how this kind of happens. Quaker Steak and Lube is a restaurant franchisor out of Pittsburgh. They were recently acquired by Travel Centers Group, and so as part of that acquisition, they changed their name from Quaker Steak and Lube Franchising Corporation to QSL Franchise Systems LLC. Others changed their brand names, and there's no similarity to the previous name. So Hispanic Tax changed their name to Siempre Tax. Sitters, etc. changed their name to SEI Healthcare Services. They have no similarity whatsoever. The Haven, which is an assisted living facility, they changed their brand name to Avondale. So brands change their names for lots of different reasons. It could be market research has shown that their consumers like a certain brand more, or they've expanded their services. So there's lots of different reasons, but the point is this happens. In order to accurately track and monitor franchise brands, you need to make sure that all of these are actually staying connected. So given the new requirements, where are you most concerned regarding your guarantee? Since I've been in this industry, the one thing I've learned, most important part of SBA financing beyond the mission is certainty around the guarantee. So I'd like to understand, if any, where are the concerns? Okay, we got a lot of responses coming in, so bear with me as we were so kind enough to do earlier. Okay, we have 2 categories coming out in the head of the pack. All of the above and self-reviewing to resolve issues. There are some of you who seem to be concerned about identifying a brand as a franchise. Okay, super, thank you. And I'm sure you're curious what other people think too, beyond the hundreds of you on this call, which is that you're very similar. So 60% from the other 2, or between 55 and 60%, were concerned about all, and not satisfying the need to review other documents was 25 and 36% respectively. So you're constantly asking us questions to help you improve both your processes and the information that you have access to finance franchises and to make better decisions. So we just wanted to share with you a few items that are coming soon that will enhance your ability to assess credit risk with franchise systems. So excuse me, this slide is a little bit out of order, and I apologize. This is actually already in place. This is the advanced search. So this is another way for you to find out brands that both are willing to sign the affiliation addendum and are eligible businesses for SBA. So in the advanced search functionality, you can pull up what shows up here and search for brands that meet SBA requirements from both a business eligibility standpoint and that they either are a franchise that meets the definition and will sign the addendum, or they aren't. They don't meet the FTC definition, but they are eligible business. This advanced search functionality for brands that are subscribers, paying subscribers, they have the ability to search for brands based on specific metrics and whether brands exist or are located in certain states, such as the fund score and growth rates and continuity rates. But for all of you, you're able to search by years in business, years franchising, and number of franchise units if you're trying to hone down to a list of brands that might meet the types of business that you want to do business with. So a real coming soon is state-level data and analysis. So the number one question that we receive from lenders, aside from is this a good franchise, and wink, wink, Edith, would you lend, is how does a franchise perform in a specific geographic area? So we are building the capability for when you go into the unit geography section that you will be able to put your mouse over a certain state and see how many units are in that state, the number of franchisees that own locations in that state, and the 5-year continuity rate. So in this case, Dunkin' Donuts, and I apologize for using that as an example, they have a 93% rounded up success rate, continuity rate in Texas. So what that means is Dunkin' Donuts opened 41 locations in Texas over the past 5 years, but they closed 4. And so you can then compare how are the success rates for Dunkin' in Texas versus their strongholds of New Jersey, Massachusetts, and Pennsylvania. A few years ago, I floated the idea at a lender conference and just asked lenders whether they would value the ability to rate franchise brands. So there's a wealth of knowledge in the lending community, and most of the time you're really not privy to it because there's information exchanges that are happening just over individual conversations. So when we release this capability, you will be able to learn from your peers based on this rating system. So you'll have the opportunity to rate your experience with a franchise brand, and you'll be able to do it anonymously under your bank's name or under your username. You can talk about your experience with the brand, how responsive the brand was, for instance, during the financing process, or if the loan defaulted, did they even respond? I just simply remember being a part of a franchise finance event, and the lender who was presenting at the time said the first default in their portfolio was a franchise, and they called up the franchisor, and the franchisor never called them back. And this is a franchise who said that they would be with them throughout. So, I mean, I've heard both positive and negative feedback from lenders on their experiences financing franchises. Some lenders have shared with us that they've had to sue franchisors. Some lenders have worked really well with franchisors to have them buy back a failed unit. All this is really critical information. And this part of the site is free, and it's, again, a community of interest site for you specific to franchise lending. So if it's a good or bad experience, you can articulate why. These comments will be aggregated to educate lenders, and franchisors will not see your bank name, will not see your name, and only feedback will be aggregated for best practices for franchisors. Now, after this presentation, I'd just like to take another pulse of, how do you feel about the SOP franchise changes? Are you feeling positive, negative, or uncertain? And we are running a little bit behind, so I'm not going to be able to get to all of the questions that have come up, but there have been some really great questions. So I want to assure you all that we will answer every single one of the questions that you have posed, and we will aggregate them, the questions and answers, and send them all to you as a follow-up. Okay, so it looks like we've got a mixed response. The overwhelming majority of you are uncertain, and but there is enough of you that say I'm feeling positive about these changes. Okay, so I'm just going to go over a few frequently asked questions. So is the is the bank responsible for knowing or determining who is authorized to sign the franchise addendum? So the answer is yes, but for lenders and franchisors who use the registry, FRANdata will verify who is authorized to sign it. And further, any additional documentation that's required, we will note it online. The franchisor will just sign the addendum once and not review for every loan. The answer is no. The franchisor will sign the addendum for every loan because the borrower's name is on the document. But on the franchise registry, they're indicating whether they are comfortable signing it, and then they will make that decision on a case-by-case basis whether they're willing to do it and the information that they need in order to make that assessment. Some franchisors will indicate that they'll sign it no matter what, and others will be more specific on their criteria. So how are we supposed to submit an SBA application if the brand will not sign the addendum when SBA needs it executed and submitted with the application? So this is a problem we've heard from lenders already, that SBA and the Central Processing Center is saying that they need the affiliation addendum signed before they're actually going to look at the package. So this is an issue that we're working with franchisors on, and some franchisors have indicated that they're comfortable with creating and signing a document that's an intent to sign. And we will also be giving you an online solution so that you can send the document through e-signature to have the franchisor and the franchisee sign. And how do we know if we have all the documents required for eligibility? So if the franchise is listed on the franchise registry and we have received their information on all the agreements, then you'll be able to see all the requirements and documents on the site. If they do not have information on the site, we would encourage you to contact us about the brand that you need so we can facilitate that telling you what is required. So I deeply apologize for not being able to get to your questions, but I said we will absolutely make sure to address each and every one of them. And I'll leave the broadcast open so that you can continue to ask questions throughout. And please go ahead and rate this presentation. We're in the business of rating franchises, and so we're completely comfortable with getting rated, and would love your feedback on areas where you'd like additional information. Okay. Thank you very much for your time today. And as I mentioned, we will send out the presentation to everybody on the webinar. We will send you the frequently asked questions that have been asked on the other webinars, and we will also answer all of the questions that you've asked on this webinar. Have a wonderful day.